President Donald Trump delivers a tough message to Tehran, demanding that Iran negotiate a new nuclear deal and threatening that time is running out and the next strike will be far from severe. The Ayatollah regime said this evening that the Iranian military is with its finger on the trigger and ready to respond to any aggression. An advisor to Supreme Leader Khamenei added that any American military action will be considered the start of a war. We will respond in an unprecedented way and target the aggressor, all of its supporters, and the heart of Tel Aviv. However, the assessment is that Israel and the United States are preparing a trap for the Iranians, like what happened in the 12-day war when the Americans were stunned by the Israeli intelligence on Iran. Meanwhile, the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq have raised the level of threats and preparations for war, while the Houthis in Yemen are monitoring American movements at sea and do not intend to allow any ship to come close, while Hezbollah warned of setting the region on fire. Iranian officials are also making angry statements that they are taking the possibility of war very seriously, and they know it will not be an easy option for them, but they are not ready to enter negotiations under military threats, declaring that if they are pushed into a corner, they will respond in an unprecedented way. The entire region is holding its breath, waiting for an explosion which seems both imminent and inevitable. So welcome to Boots on the Ground. This is the Just Before the Weekend edition. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, and because of the situation, we're reporting to you all the latest, hottest news coming out of this region. Israel's intelligence echelon believed that Supreme Leader Khamenei may agree to flexibility on the nuclear issue, but will not compromise on the ballistic missile issue and support for the regime's proxies. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel still does not know what President Trump will decide, perhaps a return from June or a strike after he sets a bar for Tehran that it cannot meet. For his part, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has forbidden his people from holding contacts with the Americans, but mediators, including Turkey and Qatar, are trying to bring him to a negotiating table. Meanwhile, the United States military is practicing defense against the Iranian preemptive strikes and retaliation. So, what is on Tehran's target list? Will the United States not seek an all-out war, but rather a controlled destabilization of the Iranian regime from within? Will Iran avoid a direct confrontation with Israel? And should Israel prepare for a multi-front escalation when any mistake could ignite a dangerous chain reaction? We have a lot of questions to examine today, but we can't forget that the terrorist organization Hezbollah is also joining the preparations for an attack against Israel because of the pressure coming on them from both the internationally recognized government of Lebanon and the IDF. Hezbollah's refusal to disarm could drag it into a violent confrontation with the IDF, but agreeing to disarm would erase its political advantage in Lebanon, leads to elimination of this organization basically. But in the background, there is fear that Iran's regime will sacrifice Hezbollah in order to save itself. Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem, in his speech this week, revealed Hezbollah's intention to fight for Iran, tying Lebanon's fate to the fate of the Supreme Leader Khamenei and deepening tensions between the organization and the Lebanese government. Amidst all of this, there is another threat that Israel could come under fire from an unexpected direction, as one of Israel's quiet neighbors has returned into the refuge of the Iranian proxies and is ready for a surprise attack. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the IDF is exposing Israel's red lines in Gaza in the ceasefire and clarifying that Hamas is building its economic power through humanitarian aid and distribution, as surplus supplies are exploited for Hamas's civilians and also the economic buildup of the terrorist organization. Speaking of which, in January of 2026, restaurants and banks have opened, markets are bustling, and money is flowing into Gaza. The IDF is warning that continuing the situation will mainly benefit Hamas, because without a clear Israeli initiative towards Phase B, Hamas will not disarm, and the IDF will be required to return and operate militarily inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas does not exploit the aid for the economic strengthening, but the IDF's control of the Philadelphia corridor makes it harder for Hamas to build up militarily. And the IDF has also revealed a new plan to establish a Hamas-free civilian zone in Rafah. For their part, Hamas has raised its alert levels out of fear of an internal assassination wave inside the Gaza Strip. According to Ashrak al-Awsat, the terrorist organization fears activity by local militias that are cooperating with Israel and ordered senior officials and operatives to change routines, carry weapons, and separate from mobile phones. And to make a brief comment of my own, anyone who tries to stop Israel from putting an end to the destructive power of the Hamas terrorist organization is sentencing us all to an eternal cycle of blood and fighting. This is a war over the future of the state of Israel, and we must not back down now. Otherwise, we'll have to do this all over again in a few more years. So, as you can see, as we go into the weekend, it's very cheerful here in the Middle East. So, let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground just before the weekend edition, where we give you the whole truth of what's happening in Israel on day 845 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region taking their orders from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And right now, the cruel regime is closer than ever to getting what it deserves, after years of abusing its own people and the people of Israel. A moment before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, and most importantly, click that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. The USS Abraham Lincoln is on the Western Indian Ocean at the heart of a larger naval armada that the one sent to the Caribbean in recent months off the coast of Venezuela is smaller compared to this one. So, President Donald Trump issued a tough message this week saying that the fleet is advancing with speed, with strength, and with purpose, and is ready to act quickly and violently if required. This matters now because the very concentration of naval power is not just a signal, it is a pressure mechanism that tells the entire region time is running out. What happened over the past 24 hours is a parallel race of threats and diplomacy. On one hand, President Trump is pushing Tehran to the negotiating table for a new nuclear deal while making it clear that there is a limited time for this process, citing Operation Midnight Hammer as an example of the destruction that has already been inflicted on Iran in the past. This also warns that the next attack will be far more severe. The American message is built on a clear formula, a deal now or a devastating blow later. Iran has responded to this take it or leave it deal with their usual deceit and double talk. And Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared that he is ready for diplomacy, but also for war. He also denies that there are direct negotiations right now with Washington, saying that there has been no contact in recent days with the American envoy Steve Witkoff. The sentence that repeats again and again in his messages is a red line. Negotiations do not take place in an atmosphere of military threats. They must be equal and based on mutual respect. In the same breath, he also declared that Iran's military forces, so as they are, have their finger on the trigger and are ready to respond to any aggression against the Iranian Republic, and at sea, at the air, and on land. He also claimed that the lessons of the 12-day war improved their defensive capabilities so that they can respond faster and with greater force in the future, according to them. To make a brief comment on my own, I'm not sure how the Iranian military could have learned any useful lessons from the 12-day war against Israel, since most of the IRGC generals who might have theoretically learned anything didn't survive the war. Let me know what you think about this in the comments section. Now, getting back to the regime's efforts to intimidate the Americans, Ali Shamkhani, Khamenei's senior advisor, issued another ridiculous statement this week saying that any American military action at any level will be considered the opening of a war. He added that Iran's response would be directed at the aggressor, at its supporters, and at the heart of Tel Aviv. From Tehran's perspective, this is a message meant to warn the Americans against the so-called limited strike. Because of them, there is no such thing. Once again, to make a brief comment, I actually think that Shamkhani is making a good point. The Americans should either go all the way or not attack at all. A limited strike is a waste of time and money and will only allow the regime to claim another false victory and score more propaganda points. In any case, while these messages are being thrown around in public, behind the scenes a completely different channel has been opened, which we can all see and call negotiations over the negotiations themselves. Because Khamenei is not allowing direct contacts, and the Witkoff-Arakshi channel is not active right now, but an indirect, intensive negotiation is being conducted through mediators, namely Oman, Qatar, and Turkey, and also Saudi Arabia and Egypt. At the same time, there is quiet coordination amongst Riyadh, Oman, and Qatar in an effort to persuade Iran to go for a new agreement with a clear warning that military action will bring severe consequences for the entire region. Saudi Arabia is also sending its own message. It wants calm and will not allow the use of its airspace for any attack by any party. And within all of this, an American list of demands is coming into view, with 3 central clauses. First, a complete halt to uranium enrichment, limiting the number of ballistic missiles and also their range, and stopping support for the regional proxies including Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Shia militias in Iraq. Israel's intelligence echelon believes that Khamenei may show flexibility on the nuclear issue, but will not compromise on the other issues. So even if a door opens to an agreement, the real dispute remains deep inside. From here comes the question that most worries Jerusalem. Are all the threats meant to produce an agreement, or is this deal only a step on its way to an attack? In other words, is President Trump setting a trap for the Ayatollah regime? The scenario is described like this. President Trump sets a bar for Tehran that it cannot meet, and then uses its failure as a pretext for a military move. And at the same time, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in a waiting position, not knowing that Trump will decide if he will decide or not, but sending his own message. Any attempt to harm Israel will be met with a far stronger response. On the military front, the United States is not only threatening, it is also running a possible dress rehearsal, kind of an air exercise in the region. The stated purpose is to drill responses to 2 scenarios: an Iranian preemptive strike that would try to disrupt an American attack, or a more likely scenario of Iranian retaliatory strikes after an attack is carried out on Iran. For their part, Iran is planning salvos of ballistic missiles, attack UAVs, and cruise missiles, similar to what already happened in 3 rounds of direct confrontations with Israel. But this time, according to intelligence assessments, the targets will mainly be American bases, vessels, and economic assets in this region, as well as energy facilities in Gulf states that would enable an attack from their own territory. So, what about the naval dimension, which may be the most effective and sensitive for the global economy? In Tehran, they are threatening and preparing for the possibility of a naval war that would include a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz using mines, swarms of all fast armed vessels, UAVs, and coastal anti-ship missiles. At the same time, the threat to commercial shipping lanes in the Bab el-Mandab Strait through the Houthis also rises, as part of tightening a naval siege if the situation explodes. An Iranian official said that the American military bases in this region would come under attack with an effort that is being made to minimize collateral damage to the host countries. And meanwhile, Iran's proxies are making their own threats. The Houthis are tracking American movements at sea, declaring that they will not allow any warship to approach the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. In Iraq, calls are being heard from pro-Iranian militias to prepare for an all-out war in support of Iran, as the militias speak of a wave of new recruits, alongside reports of internal disagreements in Iraq about the price of such an adventure. Alongside the military pressure, political and economic pressure is also being built in the European arena. The foreign ministers of the European Union are expected to discuss a dramatic step this week of designating the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. And from Israel's perspective, this is part of the broader effort to pressure this regime. On that note, details emerged this week about a secret meeting in Tel Aviv between the United States Central Command, Senior Officer Admiral Brad Cooper, and the head of Israel's military intelligence, Shlomi Binder. According to the reports, sensitive intelligence information was presented on Iranian military capabilities and ballistic missile arrays, the leadership, the Revolutionary Guards, and also their activities. The Americans were reportedly stunned by how much the Israelis know about Iran, including the fact that intelligence flow is easier when the regime is shaken. However, Israel is also thinking about what defensive measures need to be taken, as claims of an 86% interception rate during the 12-day war must be improved upon, and the munitions economy, or in other words, the production rate of the Arrow 3 interceptors, must be increased. In this context, a recent move to open a production line for these interceptors in Germany is being discussed. On the northern front, there is an assessment that Hezbollah has been significantly weakened, with perhaps 20% of the capability it had before the Israeli attack in the winter of 2024. But even in its weakened state, it still has some capability to harm Israel, and therefore, Israel is on alert, with an organized plan for war if needed. So to sum up, this is a multi-layer pressure campaign. A large American naval fleet is moving into position. Threats are escalating, indirect negotiations are taking shape, and the proxies are aligning on the readiness axis on all of Israel's borders. So, if everyone claims they want to prevent escalation, then why are all sides acting as if they are already on the starting line? We are probably very close to an explosion in this region, and if a multi-front chain reaction opens, who will take the lead on the northern border? And how is Israel already preparing there for a peak alert? We will answer all of these questions in just a moment, but first, look for the subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to take a moment and to talk to you about how you can help the situation here in Israel. As the new year begins, I want to invite you to take part in something real, something rooted in the land and in the heart. I'm talking about the Rebuild Israel campaign. It's back. And this time, we are planting life. In honor of Tu B'Shvat, we're establishing an apple orchard in Israel's northern border. This land has seen fear, destruction, and displacement. Now, it's time to bring back the life, tree by tree. This orchard isn't just about agriculture. It's about restoration. It's about providing jobs, reviving communities, and showing the people of Israel that they are not alone. When you donate, you're not just giving, you're planting. Your support puts trees in the ground, real roots, real fruit, real impact. We're turning a place marked by war into a place that grows again. This is your opportunity to take part in the physical and the spiritual renewal of the land of Israel. So if you want to support, go now to tbn.org/rebuildisrael or call 800-804-7895. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael. And the number is 800-804-7895. Plant a tree, renew the land, bless the future. Now we're continuing with the news, and I want to take you to something that happened this week that demonstrates the danger to Israel in the case of an attack on all fronts. It happened in the southern parts of Israel, on the Jordanian border near the community of Faran, as the IDF observation soldiers identified 10 armed figures running towards the fence. Within minutes, the IDF moved from tense routine to operational readiness as various combat units were scrambled along with the elite counter-terror unit and the police forces. Route 90 was closed, as were the northern entrances and exits for Melat, Israel's southern city. But after nearly an hour of tension, it became clear that this was not an infiltration. A criminal gang in Jordan was trying to smuggle something over the border, and the Jordanian police were pursuing them but neglected to update their Israeli counterparts, as it happened unusually. This time, it was just a mistake, and ended up being a drill to help prepare for the security establishment's worst nightmare, a surprise attack on Israel's borders from an unexpected place, specifically through the eastern border between Israel and Jordan. If an American strike sets off a multi-front chain reaction, attacks from the proxies do not have to start in the north or in the Gaza Strip. They are looking for a place where they can surprise, ignite a fire, and drag Israel into several fronts at once. The security echelon believes that pro-Iranian militias from Iraq and Syria, and also the Houthis from Yemen, may see Jordan as a springboard to attack through the eastern border. But the main threat still begins in the north with Hezbollah, which has a dilemma because the internationally recognized government wants them to disarm and give the state a monopoly on weapons. According to the Lebanese army and its plans, the first stage was disarmament south of the Litani River on the border with Israel. And after that, the second stage is supposed to be between the Litani River and the Awali, northern, inside Lebanon. President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam are pushing this forward, and Hezbollah feels the pressure. On the other hand, if it refuses to disarm, Hezbollah could be dragged into a violent confrontation with the IDF as Israeli pressure continues to choke any attempt at rebuilding. But if it agrees to disarm, it could lose its political advantage and shrink to the point of risking elimination as a power system. There's also the possibility that Iran will prefer to save itself and sacrifice Hezbollah if it faces a direct American threat. Elsewhere, a military source in Yemen claimed that the Houthis will not allow any American warship to approach the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, and promised military surprises waiting for the American and the Israeli enemies if the situation explodes. In Iraq, the Khatib Hezbollah group called to prepare for an Iran with an all-out war in support of the Ayatollah regime in Iran, but there are reports that not all the militias are eager to enter into a war with the United States and with Israel. Can't blame them. As you can see, Iran does not have to fire directly to ignite this region. It operates a ring of proxies, waiting for one mistake or misunderstanding to ignite a chain reaction. But if this happens, another question is, what will be the result in Gaza? A moment before we move to this issue, I want to remind you that here, we need you as ambassadors of the truth. So share this content, hit the subscribe button, and let's continue. IDF forces operated this week in the Yellow Line area in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip near Rafah as part of preparations for the next stage. This demonstrates the real situation in Gaza right now, a ceasefire on paper and renewed preparation on the ground. Because while everyone is talking about moving to phase B of the ceasefire plan, Hamas is already deep into the recovery stage. In Gaza, banks and restaurants are operating, markets are filled, studies have resumed and money is flowing. But this is not an innocent civilian recovery. The IDF warns that Hamas is building its economic power through the humanitarian aid that Israel is bringing into the Gaza Strip. Today, about 600 trucks enter Gaza every single day, bringing in more than 3 times the amount of supplies that the Gaza Strip actually needs. Each truck carries about 500,000 shekels worth of materials, and Hamas collects tax of about 15% on the humanitarian aid. That means about 45 million shekels every day is entering into Hamas's coffers, just from the movement of humanitarian aid and goods. Also, the warehouses in Gaza are full, but prices in the markets remain very high because Hamas controls the taxation, the supply chains, and the money. Even when there is a shortage of cash, the markets find solutions, including money transfer apps and offsets between the two accounts. Hamas controls the entire stream of revenue and skims off a percentage at a very, very high price at every point. That raises the question of how they're spending the taxes that they collect. And there's one thing that you need to be sure of. They're not spending the tax money on infrastructure. In the security establishment, they warn of a dangerous stagnation. Without a clear Israeli initiative towards phase B, Hamas will not disarm, not willingly, and not through a civilian mechanism. The meaning is clear. The IDF will be required to return and operate militarily inside the Gaza Strip, with 3 possible scenarios emerging. The first is a civilian technocratic government, when in practice, the clerks, managers, and the heads of the systems are Hamas people, as the organization focuses on the military wing and the civilian control remains intact. The second scenario is a temporary civilian role, during which Hamas builds its power but return to rule in the future. And then the third, less likely, is just complete chaos. The IDF assesses that in any event, Hamas will not disarm, and there is also a clear red line, the Rafah border crossing. The exit of residents will be allowed only with Israeli, Egyptian, and international approval, but for now, there will be no passage of goods. The IDF defines such an opening as a catastrophe because before October 7th, the Rafah crossing served as a door for smuggling. Now, Israel insists that goods will pass only through the Israeli crossings under full supervision. And speaking of supervision, the IDF is maintaining control of the Philadelphia corridor, which makes it harder for Hamas to build up its military. But with every day that passes, Hamas's economic power grows, and with it, a base for control, recruitment, and enforcement. However, Hamas also has problems, including a report this week that they issued an internal alert out of fear of an assassination wave. 2 assassinations of Hamas officials by rival militias have taken place in the past 2 months. Hamas fears some of the rivals are cooperating with Israel, and this is a first crack in their control. And meanwhile, the IDF is revealing a new plan to establish a Hamas-free civilian zone in eastern Rafah, with the hope that this model can be replicated. This is an attempt to create a different reality without waiting for political agreements that are not coming. And the security establishment also admits to the messaging failure. Hamas ran a dishonest but highly effective campaign in the international media during this war, making it look like there was starvation in the Gaza Strip that was all Israel's fault. Not one single verified death from starvation occurred, but Israel still struggled to respond to this information warfare campaign, even though Israel connected 3 water lines to Gaza while more than 112,000 aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip since the start of this war. The world still believes that Hamas's first narrative is true and there is starvation in Gaza. The lesson here is that having the truth on your side doesn't do much good in the world where people don't care about the truth but just want to have the narrative that they're emotionally invested in validated. And on that note, I have to make a statement of my own. Anyone who stops Israel before the destruction of the Hamas terrorist organization is sentencing all of us to an internal cycle of blood. This is not a question of politics, but a war over the future of the state of Israel, and also for the Palestinian people. Whoever blinks endangers our existence. Hamas will not disarm willingly. It understands only force. So if we do not defeat them now, they will defeat us next time, or the time after that. The question is already open. Can phase B happen without renewed fighting, or are we only delaying the inevitable? So keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, and help us in prayer. Pray for the peace of Israel, pray for wisdom to our leaders, for the IDF soldiers that are fighting on multiple fronts still after more than 2 years of war. Pray for our team here at TBN Israel, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.